so lovely to chat to you, Canadian to Canadian. I've been such an
Yes.
admirer of your work, and I think it's so important to see Canadians on the big screen and in theaters like this. So thank you for bringing another masterpiece to our theaters this
Thank
weekend.
you. Oh my God. Yes, Canadian to Canadian. I learned about the thing, the elbows up. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Which is what
absolutely.
I learned of what is called. And I'm like, it's a hockey reference, you know?
I
It's like,
love it. Yes.
yeah,
So good.
so
Um,
good.
I loved Past Lives. I loved that film so much. And something I was looking for in Materialist that I found immediately in the film was this idea of your philosophy background coming in to your
Yeah.
script and these questions that you're posing that are so hard hitting, but explored so gently and lovingly with these characters and in the story. And I've always wanted to ask you in your writing process, this is a bit of a chicken and an egg question, but these questions that you want to pose and the characters and the setting of the film, how do they come together? Is it kind of all at once or does one inform the other?
Well, I feel like it usually comes from the story and character first. And then I feel like usually the thing that really fascinates me about the story or the character is going to be something that I want to talk about. So it's kind of, yeah, it is a bit of a chicken and the egg, but I feel like, because of course we have so many thoughts and so many philosophical relationship to the world, and there's so many ways to really like live our lives, but it doesn't really become something that can become a movie until it becomes a story and characters. So even though I have always thought, because I worked as a matchmaker for about 6 months, and I always knew, even leaving that job, that I was like, I just know one day I'm going to write about it. And then I think that I've tried to write about it for a long time until, and I didn't really know how to crack the story until I met Lucy, you know, and I was able to write Lucy, and then I was then able to write Harry and John, and I think that in doing that, that's how I could figure out how to talk about the philosophical thing that I wanted to talk about. Yeah.
So interesting. And I really love how literal the questions get from the characters and us, as well as in more thematic elements in the film. And Dakota Johnson just did an interview with Amy Poehler where she was describing this process with you, where you went line by line through the script, talking about the intention of the words and the intentions of the lines. Could you talk a little bit about that process? And is that something that you repeated with Pedro and Chris as well?
Yeah, I feel like all of them, every single line was at least discussed at length, right? So, I mean, and then of course, I think that that's what I call rehearsal. We don't really do, we don't like read through the whole thing in that way. We just talk about every single line that's there. And then of course, there's going to be questions that get raised, and then we'll talk about it. And then I think that it's always kind of like figuring out, like, so that the actors know exactly what the intention of the lines are, and then how it works psychologically. And then, of course, they go off and then they really treat it as very rigorous homework that they actually then get to digest, actually try to live with it. And then when they're on set, then they're going to show up having made those lines theirs, right? And then, of course, then we can have a real shorthand. And there was such a telepathic relationship that I had with all three of them on some level, where we kind of knew we were all in search of finding a performance that conveys the meaning that we talked about in rehearsal. So it would be always like, yeah, but we talked about that in that way in rehearsal. What's the thing that how are we going to get there? And what I really love with all three of them is that, like, when they had it, we could all look at each other and we could know, you know, like there'd be so many times I would just look at Dakota and she's like, we got it, right? And
And that
it would be right. Yeah.
That's exactly how she described it. She said it was like working in one mind with you, where she could give
Yes.
you a look and you both knew how you were feeling about something. And I'm
Yeah.
sure shooting on 35 millimeter, that's so important to have that understanding so you can go in and get right to where you want to be with the characters.
Of course, it's like it gets made in prep, right? The movie gets made in prep, and yeah, you're right. Like 35 millimeter, what that means is that there's a bit of it where it's like when you roll and when you cut, there's such meaning to it, right? And then also there is that beautiful, like, and kind of natural, and sometimes frustrating for the schedule, but there's a natural break between a few takes where we change the mag, right? And what's amazing is so much of the conversations about their performance, conversations about characters, even the philosophical conversations, they happen in somewhere between 5 to 8 minutes that we're changing the mag, right? Sometimes
Yes,
it's a little faster, and
absolutely.
we're like, oh, we wish we had like one more minute. I wish it took them a little longer. But we had an amazing camera team, so it took them very
Yes.
short time. But so somewhere in there, I feel like it's such a kind of a natural and a beautiful break that then at that time we were able to work, without slowing down the process. We were like huddle up and we'll be like, okay, so we think, you know what I mean? We think what's going on with the characters is, and then you're in such a great opportunity in that way. So in a way,
Oh, I love that.
I like taking advantage of shooting on film because it will just, I don't know, it can be difficult, but it can also be very rewarding.
Absolutely. And I was so happy to see you return to the 35 millimeter because I feel like when we look at what makes directors great, and there are directors that you match to like their technical approach, for me, you and 35 millimeter is such a match made in heaven. It's a
Oh,
matchmaker's dream come true. So I
yeah.
wonder if you have thoughts of returning to 35 millimeter, or are there other things that you want to play with moving forward?
Well, I feel like when it comes to that, it always has to be connected to the story itself. Because I feel like in both cases, like there was an always a philosophical reason why we were shooting on 35 millimeters. Like with Xavier, my DP, Xavier Kirshner, my cinematographer, the way that we talk about it always is that, well, the way we shoot it, the format of it has to always reflect the movie that we're making. So, for example, for Past Lives, it was about turning time into something that's quite tangible, right? That is, so there was a conversation he and I had about the ephemeral and the permanent. And I think that somewhere in there, we kind of walked away being like, well, we have to shoot it on 35, right, millimeter film. And I feel like, meantime, I feel like when it comes to materialists, it really had to do with like, what the title has, materialists. There is something
Yes.
about it where it's like, well, the physical, the tangible, the kind of the ancient part of things, the ancient part of storytelling, the idea of shooting the cave people love scene, like it felt like you had to shoot it on film. And I think that it again had to do with kind of the philosophy behind the film more than the actual like beauty of it. Because I think it's so beautiful. I think digital is also beautiful, but it's like, so much of it has to do with like what's not just what's the most beautiful, and of course film is very beautiful, but it also has to do with like, yeah, but does it also align, does the format actually align with like the story and character and
Absolutely.
what the movie's about?
I could speak to you for hours about
I
all this,
know.
and they're
Because
asking me to
this
wrap. So
chat.
I hope
Okay.
that we can chat again, Celine. This
I
was
would love
such a
to chat
treat.
again. Okay, one more question. I know we're not allowed to, but give me one
Oh,
more.
you're so
One
sweet.
question.
One scene specifically where I thought the 35 really shined was in
Yeah.
Harry's apartment with the hallway. Both the scene with Harry and Lucy, and then on the opposite end of that scene coming back towards the
Oh
door. I'm
yeah.
trying to ask this without spoilers, but you really
Yeah.
captured that sense of timelessness that 35 really provides. So I wanted to ask you about that scene specifically. And was that exactly as you envisioned it, or did you kind of find some elements of that scene when you were on set and you had the lighting done and you could see that hallway for yourself, like in person?
Well, I feel like that scene, of course, is so connected to the architecture of the space, right? It has to do with like, so it was kind of amazing because I feel like you walk into spaces and you're trying to think about all the shots that you need uh, to play the joke, because the joke is that it is a spectacular apartment, and that she is not just sleeping with Harry, she's also sleeping with Harry's apartment, right?
Yes.
So a part of that joke has to land, and we have to find the sense of humor in the way that that space is. So when we walked into that space, it was amazing because immediately we had such an inspiration. We were like, oh, this is how we're gonna play this joke. So, and then we were running around putting together the scene that way. So I think in that situation, we were only dreaming about what it could be, and also only having the goal for what we wanted it to be, which is that it's a funny, sexy scene, right? That's the idea. So how do we find a space that you can shoot in a funny and a sexy way? And I think in that way, we were hoping that we meet the perfect love of our life, the perfect match for that joke. And then when we saw the space, we were so inspired because we saw like so many opportunities to be able to play this joke. Yeah.
Incredible. Well,
Thank you
thank you
so
so
much,
much. I
Liz.
really appreciate the time, and I'm
Thank
so
you.
excited to see you and see what you do next.
Oh my God, I can't wait. And let's talk about it with the next movie too. Thank
I
you so
would
much.
love that so much. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. I
Thank
hope
you.
that the rest of
Thank
your
you,
day goes
Liz.
well.
That was so
Thanks.
good. Thank you. Thank you.